The silence doesn't mean absence, it means setup. Just because God is silent doesn't mean he's absent. Sometimes the quiet is where the greatest moves are prepared. Don't walk away during the setup. What feels like nothing happening is actually everything shifting. 2, your breaking point might be your birthing point. That moment you feel like giving up might be the moment God is about to bring it to life. Don't confuse pressure with punishment. God uses the breaking to bring the blessing. 3, faith isn't proven in the finish, it's forged in the fight. God doesn't need you to have all the answers. He needs you to stay in the fight long enough for his answer to show up. What you call delay, he calls development. 4, God's timing won't be rushed, but it will be right. You're not behind schedule. You're just too early to see the miracle. Hold on. Don't cancel what God is still confirming. The breakthrough is coming. Don't quit before he moves. 1, the silence doesn't mean absence. It means setup. There's a sacred kind of tension that happens in the moments when we pray, believe, hope, and wait, and yet nothing seems to happen. It's that in-between season, the stretch of time between petition and fulfillment, where silence becomes the loudest sound in the room. And in that silence, doubts grow like weeds. We begin to question whether we heard God right, whether we missed a step, whether we're wasting our time. But here's the truth that cuts through that silence like a blade of light. The silence doesn't mean absence, it means setup. What most people don't understand is that divine movement is often invisible long before it's undeniable. Like seeds under the soil, there is a holy activity taking place that you can't perceive with your natural senses. Just because your situation looks unchanged doesn't mean God hasn't already set something in motion. His moves don't always come with a soundtrack. His breakthroughs don't always announce themselves in advance. And if you quit too soon, you'll miss what was already on the way. We're conditioned by the world to believe that results validate presence. If we can't see progress, we assume we're abandoned, but faith operates differently. Faith is built in the waiting room, not the winner's circle. Faith is forged in the dark. If you only believe when you see, that's not faith, that's confirmation. The real power comes when you decide to trust when everything around you says otherwise. The silence is not the enemy. In fact, the silence may be the very tool that prepares you for what you've been asking for. Because what if the silence isn't God withholding something from you, but him working something in you? What if it's not punishment, but preparation? The silence gives space for your character to develop, for your endurance to grow, for your motives to be refined, for your trust to be tested, not so God can see your faith, but so you can see it. The silence exposes what's underneath the surface. It reveals the roots. Sometimes we don't realize that our prayers are bigger than our readiness. We ask for things that our current mindset can't carry. We plead for doors to open that our character can't handle. We chase dreams that our discipline can't support. And so God, in his mercy, doesn't give us the promise prematurely. Instead, he gives us a pause, not as a punishment, but as a protection. Because a blessing received too early can become a burden. A platform without preparation can crush you. So the silence becomes the staging ground for something greater. Imagine a stage being set behind the curtain. The lights are being arranged, the props are being positioned, the actors are being prepped. But if you walk out before the curtain lifts, all you see is darkness, all you feel is uncertainty. But just because you can't see what's happening behind the curtain doesn't mean it's not happening. That's how faith works. That's how God moves, quietly, precisely, perfectly. And it's in the silence that we either solidify or sabotage our future. Some people start doubting what God told them in the dark because they no longer hear what they heard in the light. They begin rewriting their calling to match their current comfort. They shrink their prayers. They lower their expectations. They stop showing up, not realizing that the silence was not the end of the story. It was the middle of the miracle. Too many people abort their breakthrough because they misread the silence. They misinterpret the pause as a problem, but growth rarely looks like growth in real time. In fact, some of the deepest growth is underground. Trees that reach the sky have roots that run even deeper. And roots take time. Roots take darkness. Roots take silence. You cannot microwave divine destiny. You cannot rush what God is refining. Some seasons are meant to stretch you beyond your limits, not to break you, but to expand your capacity. The silence is stretching you. The silence is growing you. The silence is preparing you for something you prayed for but didn't know how to carry. Think about this. When you build muscle, you don't just do it by lifting weight. You do it by creating tension. The tension breaks the muscle so it can rebuild stronger. And in the same way, spiritual strength is built through tension, the tension of trusting when there's no evidence, the tension of believing when there's no breakthrough, the tension of staying faithful when everything inside you wants to run. That tension is proof that something is being built. The silence doesn't mean God walked away. It means he's closer than ever. You just can't feel him because he's working on something so deep that it bypasses your emotions. He's not feeding your feelings. He's forming your future. He's not catering to your comfort. He's crafting your calling. And calling is never cheap. Purpose doesn't go on sale. There is a cost to walking out your destiny, and part of that cost is learning how to walk through the silence without walking away. We often want God to shout from the heavens, but more often than not, he whispers, because whispers require closeness. You can only hear a whisper when you lean in. So maybe the silence isn't a sign to give up, it's a signal to draw near, to lean in, to press closer, because proximity is what reveals the presence. The closer you get, the more you'll begin to sense what was always there. There's a moment in everyone's journey where you hit what feels like a wall. No progress, no confirmation, just the stillness. That's the point where people either surrender or stand. They either tap out or trust, but if you understand that the silence is sacred, you'll realize that it's not a sign to stop, it's an invitation to keep showing up, to stay planted, to remain faithful. Because harvest doesn't come from sporadic effort, it comes from sustained obedience. Obedience in the silence is the purest kind of obedience. Because when you obey without seeing, when you stay consistent without claps, when you keep praying without results, when you serve without spotlight, that's when you know your faith is real. That's when you know you're not doing it for the applause, you're doing it because it's who you are. That's when transformation starts to take root. The silence is not empty. It's full of purpose, full of movement, full of unseen breakthroughs. What looks like nothing is actually everything, but you got to stay long enough to see it. You've got to endure long enough to outlast the illusion, because the enemy loves to work in the silence too. He loves to whisper lies into your weary moments. Lies that sound like, you missed it, God forgot you, you're not enough, nothing will change. But those are just echoes in the valley. They're not the voice of truth. They're distractions designed to get you to step out of the process prematurely. Because the enemy can't stop God from moving, but he can try to stop you from staying. That's why the silence is spiritual warfare. That's why you need discernment in the stillness. To recognize that just because you can't see the hand of God doesn't mean you should let go of his promise. Everything significant God ever did started in silence. Creation began in darkness. Resurrection came after 3 days of stillness. Deliverance was often preceded by delay. That's the pattern. The silence precedes the shift. The pause comes before the promise. And when you understand that, you stop panicking in the quiet. You stop quitting when it's calm. Because you know that setup always comes before the show. God is not a performer. He's a master planner. He doesn't rush the process to impress your timeline. He works in fullness, not fastness. And when the fullness of time comes, what once looked impossible will look inevitable. But you won't see it if you quit. You won't see it if you walk away. You've got to endure the silence to experience the setup. In fact, the silence is where intimacy grows. It's easy to love God when he's answering prayers, but real intimacy is formed when you love him, even when you don't understand him. When you seek him, even when you can't feel him. When you trust him, even when he seems distant. That's love refined by fire. That's relationship built in reality, not fantasy. And there's something special about people who've been through the silence and didn't give up. There's a fire in their eyes, a strength in their spirit, because they didn't just read about God, they walked with him. They didn't just study promises, they clung to them. And when the move finally came, they weren't surprised, they were ready. So don't despise the silence. Don't rush the process. Don't assume absence. God is setting something up, something bigger than your preference, something stronger than your timeline, something deeper than your feelings. He's not just preparing the promise, he's preparing you for the promise. Stay faithful, stay planted, stay in position. Because what looks like silence is often the sound of heaven setting the stage. 2, your breaking point might be your birthing point. There's a moment in every life when pressure peaks, when the weight feels unbearable, when the tears run without permission, when the doors you thought would open slam shut, and you feel like you're at the end of yourself, at the breaking point, the threshold of collapse, the edge of quitting. But what if that very breaking point is where something new is trying to be born? What if the moment you feel like giving up is the moment just before God brings it forth? We tend to see breaking as the end, as failure, as defeat. But the truth is, nothing significant is birthed without breaking. No breakthrough comes without pressure. No new life comes without labor. There's a process in place on that doesn't feel good while it's happening, but is absolutely necessary to bring about the promise. And if you misinterpret the pain, you might walk away from the very moment God was about to deliver what you've been waiting for. Pain is not always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. It's not always a sign you did something wrong. It's often confirmation that you're on the edge of something right. Because there is a pain that precedes promise, a pressure that comes before purpose, and when the breaking begins, something deep is being released. Look at nature. A seed cannot sprout unless it first breaks. That hard outer shell must split open for the life inside to emerge, and yet from the outside, it looks like destruction. From the outside, it looks like something is falling apart, but on the inside, something is coming alive. You might feel like your life is falling apart, but what if it's falling into place? Many people think they're being buried when really they're being planted. They mistake darkness for death, when in reality, it's the environment for growth. Just because you can't see progress doesn't mean it's not happening. The deepest transformations happen in the hidden places. And your breaking point might be the exact condition your spirit needs to shift into birthing. But it doesn't feel that way when you're in it. When you're in the struggle, all you can feel is the stretch. All you can see is the loss. All you can hear are the voices telling you it's over, that you're too weak, that it's too late, that it's too much, that nothing's gonna change. But those voices don't know what God planted inside you. They don't know what's forming beneath the surface. They don't know the power of what you're carrying. Because the breaking has a purpose. It strips away pride. It removes the parts of us that can't go into the next season. It humbles us, refines us, sharpens our vision, clarifies our call. There are some things you would never let go of unless life broke you in a certain way. There are some lessons you would never learn unless something pushed you to the edge. And it's on the edge that you either break down or break through. There are places in life that you can't get to unless you go through pain. Not around it, not over it, through it. And going through it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's pretty. It just means you refuse to give up in the middle. Because the middle is messy. The middle is where you question everything. The middle is where the contractions get intense, where you don't know if you're gonna make it. But the middle is also where new life is closest to arriving. You can't birth anything without travail. You can't step into destiny without leaving comfort. You can't go higher without letting go of the things weighing you down. And sometimes the breaking point is how God gets your attention. It's how he shakes loose what no longer serves you. It's how he interrupts the cycles that were keeping you stuck. The breaking isn't just about pain, it's about positioning. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. That heartache wasn't just loss, it was redirection. That disappointment wasn't just delay, it was development. That betrayal wasn't just hurt, it was exposure. It revealed who was never meant to go with you into the next level. And yes, it broke your heart, but it also cleared your path. You wouldn't have walked away on your own, so life had to push you out of the comfort zone. And you may be thinking, if one more thing breaks, I'll break too. But here's the truth. You're stronger than you think. Not because you feel strong, but because something inside you refuses to quit. Something inside you still believes, still hopes, still gets up. That's not weakness, that's power. That's faith in motion. And that persistence, that endurance, that grit, that's the sign of something about to be birthed. Have you ever seen a woman in labor? It's raw, it's loud, it's chaotic. But nobody tells her to stop. Why? Because the pain is part of the process. The contractions are a signal that delivery is near, and the pain intensifies just before the birth. That's how it works spiritually too. Sometimes the pressure gets greatest right before the release, right before the miracle, right before the manifestation. Don't misread the pain. It's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to deliver you. Pain can be the catalyst for purpose. It drives you inward, it reveals what matters, it simplifies what's essential. Pain doesn't lie, it tells the truth, and sometimes that truth is what you've been ignoring for far too long. The breaking pulls it to the surface, and you can either suppress it or surrender to it. But only surrender will birth something new. Surrender doesn't mean giving up, it means giving into the process, to the timing, to the hand that's forming you. Surrender is strength under control. It's faith that says, even if I don't like it, I'll still lean into it. Even if I don't feel ready, I'll still show up. Because what's inside you is worth fighting for. The dream, the purpose, the calling, it's worth the labor, it's worth the tears, it's worth the discomfort. But the birthing can't happen if you give up in the pain. You've got to push, you've got to breathe, you've got to keep going. Not because you feel strong, but because something inside you is too valuable to leave undeveloped. Don't die with your dreams still inside you. Don't bury what you were supposed to birth. Let the pressure propel you. Let the breaking build you. Let the pain bring it forth. Sometimes the most powerful things in life don't begin with a celebration, they begin with a collapse. Something has to break so something greater can be born. That's how change happens. That's how growth happens. It's messy, it's uncertain, but it's real, and when it's real, it leaves a mark, not a scar of shame, but a sign of strength, proof that you made it, that you carried it, that you birthed it. So don't underestimate your breaking point. Don't label it as failure. Look deeper. It might be the starting point of everything you prayed for. It might be the very moment God uses to birth your next season. And when it comes, it won't come gently. It won't come comfortably. But it will come with power, it will come with clarity, it will come with new life. Your breaking is not the end of you, it's the beginning of something greater inside of you. Don't quit in the pain, don't run from the process, don't silence what was meant to speak through you. That breaking point you hate might be the very place God chooses to release something through you that this world desperately needs. You're not breaking down, you're breaking through. Something is being born. 3, when you don't see a way, make room for the one who does. There are moments when life presses you into a corner and every path you thought would be open is blocked, every plan you made has fallen apart, every door you were banking on is locked shut. That's when people start saying, there's just no way forward, no way out, no way this situation can turn around. But that's the exact moment when something supernatural can happen if you refuse to fold and instead make space for the one who sees beyond what you see. Because just because you can't see the way doesn't mean there isn't one. We live in a culture obsessed with control. We want steps, we want certainty, we want the blueprint before we build. But purpose doesn't work that way. Sometimes all you'll get is a whisper, a push, a pause that makes no sense. And what do we do when we don't understand? We panic, we push harder, we overthink, we force it. And we forget that not seeing the way is not the same thing as there being no way. See, if you only ever move when you have clarity, you'll never develop real faith. Faith isn't based on what's seen. It's about moving forward even when it doesn't make sense. It's about trusting the unseen hand when your own hands are empty. It's about believing that what looks like a dead end might actually be a setup for something greater. But you can't experience that kind of shift unless you learn to release your need for control and make room for the unexpected. When the sea stood in front of them and the army chased them from behind, they saw no way. They cried out, they panicked, they doubted. But what they couldn't see was that the sea was never the obstacle, it was the opportunity. And in that moment, when it seemed there was no way, a path was made through what looked impossible. Because the presence of impossibility is not a sign to quit, it's a signal to lean in. Sometimes we ask for clarity, but what we need is capacity. Capacity to hold uncertainty, capacity to walk blind, capacity to believe without evidence. And that capacity is only developed in the moments where logic ends, when your understanding fails. That's when something deeper has to rise. That's where your trust is tested, not in the predictable, but in the unpredictable, not in the familiar, but in the fog. When you don't see the way, the temptation is to shrink your dream to fit your resources, to shrink your faith to fit your frustration, to shrink your expectation to match your experience. But you weren't created to shrink, you were born to expand. And expansion doesn't happen in safe places. It happens in wild ones, in uncomfortable ones, in the I don't know how, but I still believe spaces. You're not responsible for figuring out every step. You're responsible for taking the next right one. You're responsible for listening when you feel the nudge, for showing up when quitting seems easier, for staying soft in a world that hardens people, for staying open when fear says to close, for preparing even when you don't know what for. That's how you make room for a way to appear. What if the obstacle is not proof of failure, but proof of favor? What if the delay is not denial, but divine alignment? What if the closed door is not rejection, but protection? We're quick to draw conclusions based on what we can see, but your vision has limits. That's why trust is required. That's why obedience matters. That's why your heart posture matters more than your head strategy. The greatest breakthroughs don't happen in places of certainty. They happen when you're out of options, out of strength, and out of answers, but still open, still showing up. Still believing that something good is possible, that something new can rise from the ashes, that something beautiful can come from what broke you. That's what it means to make room, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Room in your schedule, room in your heart, room in your thinking. Because if you're full of your own logic, there's no space for the miraculous. If you're obsessed with your own timeline, there's no room for divine timing. If you're consumed with how it looks to others, you'll never have space for how it's meant to look through faith. And here's what's wild. The way usually shows up when you least expect it. Not when you have it all figured out, not when the conditions are perfect, but when you've surrendered. When you're no longer striving to control it, but willing to walk with courage in the dark. That's when paths open. That's when solutions appear. That's when doors swing wide that you didn't even knock on. You don't have to manufacture the way, you have to manage your mindset while you wait for it. Because what you think about during the wait determines whether you walk into the promise or wander in the wilderness. Waiting is not wasted time, it's weight training time. It's where character forms, where perspective deepens, where trust is tested and proved. You can't see the way? Good. That means it's bigger than you. That means you won't be able to take the credit when it happens. That means you'll know it wasn't your hustle, but His help. It means the testimony won't be, look what I did, but look what came through when I stayed faithful. That's the kind of way worth waiting for. That's the kind of miracle worth making room for. Don't confuse silence with absence. Just because nothing seems to be shifting doesn't mean nothing is happening. The way is being carved in the unseen. And the preparation is not just external, it's internal. You're being shaped while you wait, strengthened, stretched. And stretched things are stronger than slack ones. Stretched people are capable of carrying more than they ever imagined. Some of the greatest stories started in the darkest places. Not with resources, but with resolve. Not with influence, but with obedience. Not with the way made clear, but with a heart that was willing. What do you do when you don't see the way? You worship. You prepare. You keep building. You plant seeds in a soil you can't yet see sprouting, because that's the kind of faith that shakes things loose. That's the kind of trust that opens the heavens. There is a way forward, even if it doesn't look like the one you planned, even if it doesn't come in the package you expected, even if it requires a different pace than you wanted. You were never called to walk by sight. You were called to walk by a conviction that what is unseen is more real than what is seen, that what's being formed in faith is more powerful than what's being forced in fear. So keep going, keep believing, keep showing up. The way you thought it would happen may have died, but the promise didn't, the dream didn't, and the delay didn't delete your destiny. It's just making space, clearing distractions, sharpening your senses, refining your focus. Make room in your plans for what you can't plan. Make room in your heart for what hasn't yet arrived. Make room in your mind for a way you haven't even imagined. Just because you don't see a way doesn't mean the way isn't coming.